The sun hung high in the sky that afternoon, casting an oppressive heat down onto the cracked, sun-scorched asphalt. Jace Carter, a mechanic whose life often felt like it was stuck in a never-ending cycle of rusted engines and grease-stained overalls, wiped a sweat-drenched brow as he squatted next to the engine of a stubborn old Chevy. The engine barely hummed to life each morning, and today was no different. The sputtering sound it made was almost a mocking reminder of how little progress he had made in his own life. He had been working on cars for as long as he could remember, always fixing other people's problems, but never quite able to fix his own. His shop, if you could call it that, was a small, weathered building at the edge of town, hidden from the bustling parts of the world where real success seemed to be happening. Jace wasn't bitter. He was used to it. But today, something in the air felt different. As he adjusted a wrench on the Chevy's worn-out engine, a glimmer of something caught his eye. He squinted against the blinding light and turned his head to see a car. No, not just any car, but a Rolls-Royce Ghost, parked just off the side of the highway. Its sleek, dark silhouette stood out against the otherwise dusty surroundings, like a beacon of something foreign and unattainable. For a moment, Jace's work boots crunched loudly on the gravel beneath him as he took a few steps closer, his curiosity piqued. It wasn't every day that something as beautiful and rare as that Rolls-Royce found itself stranded in the middle of nowhere. Jace had worked on all kinds of cars. Nothing fancy, mostly old, beaten-up models that had seen better days. The idea of someone that rich needing his help seemed almost laughable, but something about this particular car kept drawing his attention. He dropped his wrench into the toolbox with a soft clank and walked toward the car, his heart beating a little faster now. The engine was quiet, and the car was still. But the way it gleamed in the sun made Jace feel as though it had a life of its own, something far beyond the ordinary problems he faced every day. As he approached, Jace's gaze caught the faint shadow of a figure inside the vehicle. For a brief second, he thought he might be imagining things, but then the window of the Rolls-Royce slowly slid down, revealing a woman who looked as if she had stepped out of a world he could only dream about. She had a calm elegance about her that seemed to draw all the attention in the world, and her striking gray eyes met his with an unspoken question. She had blonde hair, perfectly styled, and wore a crisp white business suit that seemed far too immaculate for the dusty road. Her presence alone made the hot, dry highway feel suddenly cooler, like she had stepped in from another universe altogether. "You're not afraid to get your hands dirty," she said, her voice smooth, but there was an edge of something commanding about it. She wasn't asking. It was a statement. Jace paused for a moment, the usual defensive walls inside him rising. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that, especially not by someone who looked like she belonged in the boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies. Most people like her didn't even glance at mechanics like him. Yet here she was, addressing him as though she expected him to fix her problem. "No, ma'am," Jace replied, his voice steady, though his mind raced. "I live under the hood." A small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of her lips, as if she had heard that answer before, or maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the first time she had encountered someone who didn't shy away from getting dirty. "Need help?" she asked simply, her tone still cool, but with a touch of curiosity. Jace was taken aback by her directness. This was no ordinary client. This was no simple task. For a moment, he just stood there, thinking about how the world had been treating him lately. The daily grind, the struggle to keep his head above water, the feeling of being stuck in a rut. But this woman, with her Rolls-Royce and her commanding presence, wasn't someone who fit into his world. Still, he had been taught to always lend a hand when someone needed it, regardless of their background. "Tow truck says it'll take 2 hours," she continued, breaking his thoughts. "Can you fix it?" Jace surveyed the car, his gaze flicking between the gleaming exterior and the under-the-hood complications that were bound to be there. He had worked on luxury cars before, but never one like this. Still, he didn't hesitate. "I can try," he said, the words leaving his mouth before he could second-guess himself. As he opened the hood and began his work, Jace quickly fell into a rhythm, his hands moving with practiced precision. Every twist of the wrench, every pull of the wire, his mind fully absorbed in the task at hand. Time passed, minutes bleeding into each other, but he barely noticed. The woman remained silent, standing next to the car, arms folded, her sharp gaze watching him with an interest that he found hard to place. There was something almost peaceful about it, Jace thought. In the midst of this world where everyone seemed to be rushing, running to something they couldn't quite name, here she was, still, waiting. It was as if she wasn't in a hurry to go anywhere. The steady hum of the highway and the occasional rush of passing cars was the only sound that filled the space between them. Jace didn't mind the quiet. It felt strangely comfortable, a stark contrast to the loud, often judgmental world he usually worked in. By the time he had the engine humming again, Jace wiped his hands on a rag and leaned back to admire the work. The Rolls-Royce's engine purred to life, as smooth as if it had never seen the side of the road at all. He closed the hood and stood there for a moment, catching his breath. "Good as new," he muttered to himself, though he had no idea what kind of luck it was that he had managed to fix such a high-end vehicle with his hands. As he wiped his brow once more, he glanced over at the woman, expecting a simple thank you and a few bills for his work. But instead, she stepped toward him, her gaze steady, unwavering. "I'm impressed," she said, her voice a bit softer now, but still with that unmistakable authority. "You're quite skilled." Jace just nodded, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't used to compliments, especially not from people who seemed so far removed from his world. "You know," she continued, taking a step closer, "I've been in this business for years. People like me. We rarely get to meet people like you. You've got a rare talent." Jace shifted uncomfortably, not sure where this conversation was headed. But then, without warning, she asked, "How would you like to join me for a drive?" He blinked, not entirely sure he had heard her correctly. Join her? In a car like this? Jace stood frozen for a moment, the words hanging in the air like a strange echo. Join her? The invitation was so unexpected, so out of place that he wasn't sure if he had heard her correctly. The woman, who just moments ago had been a stranger in a luxury car, was now offering something far beyond what Jace could have ever imagined. He glanced at the Rolls-Royce, still parked under the oppressive sun, its sleek lines reflecting the sky. The engine hummed quietly, as though it had never been in distress. Jace felt a brief pang of disbelief. How was it that someone like her, so polished and pristine, would want to spend even a minute with a mechanic like him? "Did you just say, join you?" he asked, his voice uncertain. She smiled again, but this time it was a little more knowing, as though she could read the hesitation in his eyes. "Yes, I did," she replied simply, her gaze steady and calm. There was no arrogance in her tone, no condescension, just a quiet confidence that made it impossible for Jace to turn away. For a moment, Jace's mind raced. He wasn't used to people offering him anything. He was used to fixing things, solving problems, and then watching people drive away, never thinking twice about who had helped them. That was his life, fixing things, but never being part of something bigger. The idea of being invited into the world of a CEO, of someone with power, wealth, and influence, was foreign to him. It felt like something out of a dream. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing down at his hands, still covered in grease. His work boots were scuffed, worn from years of labor, and his clothes were no better. He wasn't dressed for a drive in a luxury car. He wasn't even sure what kind of world it was, the world she came from. And yet, here she was, offering him a ride. No strings attached. "I don't even know where we're going," he said, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. "I mean, I fix cars. I don't." She raised her hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "You're right," she said, cutting through his nervous rambling. But sometimes, you don't need to know where you're going to get there. Jace blinked, trying to process her words. They didn't make sense to him at first. It was like a riddle, something out of place in his usual no-nonsense world. But there was something about her presence, her calmness, that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he could trust her. The tension in his chest began to loosen slightly. His mind fought with itself, torn between the logical side of him, which screamed that this was insane, and the part of him that was tired of being stuck in the same old routine, the part that longed for something different. "I've never been in a car like this," he muttered under his breath, half to himself. "It's not about the car, Jace," she said, as though reading his mind. "It's about the journey." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made Jace's heart beat a little faster. He looked at her again, noticing how poised she was, how effortlessly she seemed to command the world around her. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met before. She was confident, successful, and yet here she was, offering him a ride, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Without knowing exactly why, Jace found himself nodding. "All right, let's do it," he said, surprised by his own willingness to step into the unknown. She smiled, her gray eyes softening just a bit. "Good," she said. "You won't regret it." With that, Jace closed his toolbox, left it by the side of the road, and walked around to the passenger side of the Rolls-Royce. He hesitated for a moment before opening the door and slipping inside. The interior of the car was everything he had imagined. Rich leather seats, polished wood, and the faint scent of luxury that seemed to saturate the air. As the door clicked shut behind him, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the rearview mirror. The man staring back at him looked like a stranger. He barely recognized the man he had become. A mechanic, sure, but someone who had been invisible for so long that even his own reflection seemed like a distant memory. He tried to shake off the feeling of discomfort, but it lingered like he didn't belong. She started the engine, and the car purred to life, gliding down the road with a quiet elegance that felt worlds apart from the clunky old vehicles Jace usually worked on. He had to admit, it was an impressive ride. But even more impressive was the woman behind the wheel. "You're quiet," she said after a while, breaking the silence. Jace shifted in his seat, still unsure how to start this conversation. What could he possibly have in common with a woman who ran a successful company? Someone who was used to being in control of everything around her. "I'm not sure what to say," he admitted finally, his voice low. "I don't know why you asked me to come with you. I don't really fit in with your world." Her lips curved into a soft smile, but there was a spark in her eyes. "You're not here because you fit in," she said. "You're here because you stand out." Jace turned his head to look at her, confused. "I don't stand out. I'm just a mechanic. I fix things. I don't do anything special." She shook her head slightly, her hand steady on the wheel. "You don't get it, do you? Fixing things is exactly what makes you special. You see the world differently. You understand how to make things work, even when everyone else gives up. That's rare. And it's exactly what this world needs more of." Jace sat back in his seat, his mind reeling from her words. He wasn't used to hearing things like that. His whole life had been about making ends meet, scraping by, and getting through each day. He had never thought of himself as someone who could change the world. But as the car sped down the highway, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something he had been waiting for without even realizing it. The road stretched out ahead of them, and for the first time in a long time, Jace felt like the future wasn't as uncertain as it once seemed. Maybe he was finally on the right path. The car hummed steadily beneath them, the world outside slipping by in a blur of colors. Dusty fields, distant hills, and the occasional farmhouse dotted along the horizon. The peaceful rhythm of the ride seemed to put Jace at ease, though his mind remained a whirlwind of thoughts. He glanced at the woman driving, trying to decipher her, to understand what had prompted this unexpected invitation. He had no doubt she had many people vying for her attention, People who fit neatly into her world of corporate meetings, polished suits, and high-end cars. But somehow, here he was, a mechanic from a small town, sitting in the passenger seat of her Rolls-Royce, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I've been in this business a long time," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but there was a certain weight to her words, like she had seen things that most people never would. "I've worked with some of the most powerful people in the world, but it's rare that I come across someone like you." Jace wasn't sure how to respond. "Someone like me?" he asked, his voice tinged with confusion. She glanced over at him, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "Someone who doesn't just fix things because it's their job. Someone who understands the way things work on a deeper level. You have a rare quality, an ability to see potential where others see nothing but problems." Jace was taken aback by her words. He had never thought of himself in that way. In his world, fixing things wasn't about seeing potential. It was about getting the job done. Day in and day out, he fixed broken engines, rusty pipes, and worn-out parts, all the while knowing that it didn't really change anything. He was just one man in a world of millions, doing his part but never standing out. At least, that's how he had always felt. "You're wrong," he said softly. "I'm just a guy with a wrench. I fix cars. That's it. That's all I've ever known how to do." She shook her head, a slight smile playing at the corners of her lips. "No, Jace. You don't get it. There's a difference between doing something because it's your job and doing something because you have a passion for it. You don't just repair engines, you bring them back to life. That's something that takes more than just skill. It takes heart." Jace felt the weight of her words settle over him. He had never thought about it that way. Heart. What did heart have to do with fixing an engine? And yet, as he thought about it more, he realized she was right. There was something inside him that made him keep going, even when things seemed hopeless. He couldn't explain it, but when he worked on a car, he felt a connection to it, as though the vehicle's fate was in its hands. The engine wasn't just a machine to him. It was a living, breathing thing that needed care, attention, and understanding. Maybe that was what she saw in him. Something more than just a mechanic. Maybe she saw someone who could do more than just fix what was broken. As the miles stretched on, the landscape changing with each passing hour, Jace began to open up in a way he hadn't expected. It wasn't as though he was spilling his life story, but something about the quiet, unhurried pace of the journey seemed to coax the words out of him. He found himself talking about his childhood, about the little shop his father had run before he passed away. He spoke of the countless days spent under the hood of cars, trying to keep them running just a little bit longer. The woman listened attentively, her hand steady on the wheel, her eyes focused on the road ahead. She didn't interrupt, didn't try to steer the conversation in any particular direction. She simply let him speak, and for the first time in a long time, Jace felt like someone was actually listening. Really listening. By the time they stopped for a break at a small diner on the side of the road, Jace felt a strange sense of relief. The weight that had been pressing down on him for so long seemed a little lighter. He hadn't realized how much he needed this. A moment of quiet, a chance to talk to someone who wasn't judging him or expecting him to be anything other than himself. They sat in a booth, the low hum of the diner's air conditioning, mingling with the soft murmur of other patrons. The waitress brought over coffee and refilled their cups without a word. Jace took a sip, his mind still racing. "I never thought I'd end up here," he said, almost to himself. "I always thought there was more to life than fixing broken engines. But I don't know. It feels like that's all I'm ever going to do. Fix things and move on." The woman set her cup down gently, her eyes focused on him. "You're wrong again," she said. "You don't just fix things, Jace. You rebuild them. There's a difference." Jace stared at her, a knot forming in his stomach. "What do you mean?" "You're not just repairing machines. You're learning how they work, how they can be better. That's what makes you different. You take the time to understand something, to figure out what's wrong with it, and then you make it better." She paused, letting the words sink in. And that's something people with power understand. They don't just look for quick fixes. They look for people who can see the long-term potential. People who are willing to go the distance. Jace felt a wave of emotion wash over him, something he couldn't quite put into words. He had never thought about his work in that way, never considered that what he did every day could be seen as something bigger than just a job. But maybe, just maybe, she was right. Maybe there was more to him than he had ever given himself credit for. As they continued their journey, the conversation shifted. She told him stories of the corporate world, of boardrooms filled with powerful people, of deals made and broken, of the constant pressure to succeed. But beneath the stories, Jace could sense a longing, a desire for something more than just wealth and success. She was driven, yes, but there was a restlessness in her eyes, a search for meaning that mirrored his own. The miles passed by, the scenery changing from the open fields to dense forests and winding roads. And as they drove, Jace began to realize something. This was no ordinary ride. It wasn't just about the car or the journey. It was about discovering something new. Something about himself, something about the world, something about the woman sitting beside him, who had turned his life upside down in a matter of hours. Jace wasn't sure where this would lead, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe he was on the edge of something important, something life-changing. And no matter how uncertain the future seemed, he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't turning back. The next stretch of road seemed to stretch endlessly before them, the landscape changing from lush green fields to rocky, rolling hills as they traveled deeper into unfamiliar territory. Jace didn't know where they were going, but for some reason, it didn't matter. He had never been one to trust easily, but something about the quiet confidence of the woman driving, Madison, made him feel like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Madison hadn't said much after their brief stop at the diner. She seemed lost in thought, her gaze fixed firmly on the road ahead. Every now and then, Jace would glance over at her, studying the way her hands gripped the steering wheel, her fingers lightly drumming in time with the beat of the music playing softly in the background. He had never met anyone like her, so calm, so composed, yet there was a sharp intensity to her that was impossible to ignore. "You've been quiet," Jace finally said, breaking the silence. "What's on your mind?" Madison didn't answer immediately. Her eyes flicked over to him, studying him for a moment as if she were deciding whether or not to share whatever was weighing on her mind. Finally, she spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," she began, her voice softer now, less businesslike, "about how you feel like all you do is fix things and then move on. I understand that feeling. But what if fixing things isn't the end of the story? What if it's just the beginning?" Jace shifted in his seat, unsure of what she meant. "What do you mean? Fixing things doesn't exactly lead to anything else. It's just what I do to get by." Madison shook her head slightly. "That's where you're wrong. Fixing things isn't just about putting them back together. It's about giving them a new life, a second chance. A car isn't just a machine to you, Jace. It's a possibility. You're not just repairing it. You're giving it the chance to be something better than it was before. And that's something people like me understand." Jace couldn't help but feel a spark of curiosity. He had never really thought of his work in that way, giving a second chance to something that was broken. He had always just focused on the task at hand, making sure the engine ran again, getting the car back on the road. But Madison made him see something deeper, something he hadn't considered before. "So you think that's what I do?" he asked slowly. "I give second chances." Madison smiled, though there was a hint of sadness behind her expression. "I think that's what you're capable of. But you don't see it yet. You're so focused on fixing the immediate problem that you don't realize the bigger picture. You have the ability to change things, to make them better, in ways that go beyond the surface." Jace felt a flicker of something in his chest, something like hope, but it was fleeting. He wasn't sure if he was ready to believe in that. He had spent his life feeling small, like just another cog in the machine, and the idea that he could be capable of something bigger seemed almost impossible. The road ahead grew darker as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Madison slowed the car down as they approached a small, secluded cabin nestled in the woods. It looked out of place in the wilderness, modern and sleek, with large glass windows reflecting the fading light. The contrast between the natural surroundings and the sharp, man-made structure was striking. "We're here," Madison said as she pulled into the driveway. Jace didn't know what to expect. He had imagined they might stop at a hotel or a more familiar location, but this felt different. It felt like they were about to enter a new world entirely, one that he had no understanding of. As they got out of the car, Madison motioned for Jace to follow her inside. The cabin was even more stunning on the inside, with minimalist furniture, open spaces, and a sense of calm that seemed to permeate the air. Jace felt like an intruder in this world of luxury and tranquility, his dirty work boots and oil-streaked clothes completely out of place. Madison led him to a large open room with windows that looked out over the woods. A fire crackled in the corner, casting a warm glow on the stone walls. She gestured for him to sit on one of the plush chairs near the fire. "Make yourself comfortable," she said, her tone still warm, but with an undercurrent of something else. Something deeper. "We've got some time. I want to show you something." Jace sat down, feeling a little awkward, unsure of what to expect. Madison disappeared into another room for a few moments before returning with a laptop and a few folders. She set them down on the coffee table between them, her expression focused now, as if she were preparing to share something important. "Jace, I didn't bring you here just for a ride," she began, her voice serious now. "I need someone like you. Someone who can see the potential in things that others can't. Someone who understands the value of hard work, of building something from the ground up." Jace's heart skipped a beat. What was she talking about? He had been expecting a casual conversation, maybe some lighthearted banter. But this was different. He could feel the weight of her words, like they were leading up to something big. "Are you asking me to work for you?" he asked, his voice a little more cautious now. Madison didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened the laptop and pulled up a series of documents, showing Jace a business proposal, one that involved him, in a way he never could have imagined. It was a project, an opportunity that could change everything. It involved the very skills that Jace had honed over the years, the ability to rebuild, to make things better. But it was bigger than anything he had ever done. This wasn't just about fixing cars. It was about fixing lives, about building something that would last. Jace stared at the screen, his mind racing. He had always been a mechanic, always worked with his hands, never thought much about the bigger picture. But now, as he looked at the proposal, he felt something stir within him. This was a chance to make a real difference, to be part of something that wasn't just about fixing things for the sake of it, but about creating a future where he could use his skills in ways he had never dreamed possible. "I know this is a lot to take in," Madison said, her voice steady but soft. "But you have the ability to make something incredible happen, Jace. I've seen it in you from the moment I met you, and I want you to be a part of it." Jace's mind was reeling, but somewhere deep inside, he knew this was a turning point. This was the moment that would define the rest of his life. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but for the first time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he could be. The silence that followed Madison's proposal hung in the air like a weight, pressing down on Jace as he tried to process what she had just offered him. He had always prided himself on his ability to think on his feet, to make quick decisions when it mattered most. But this was different. This was bigger than any engine he'd ever worked on, bigger than anything he had ever imagined. He looked at the documents she had laid out in front of him, his eyes scanning the proposal in front of him. It was a blueprint, a roadmap for a project that would take him far beyond the small mechanic shop he had run for years. There were figures and plans, bold ideas for growth, and a vision that felt like it was straight out of a dream. Madison wasn't just asking him to fix something. She was asking him to be part of something that could change the way people thought about rebuilding, about reviving what others had given up on. His heart pounded in his chest, uncertainty mixing with excitement. He had always been the guy who worked with his hands, the one who fixed the broken parts, the one who made sure the engine roared back to life. But this was different. This wasn't about fixing a broken car. This was about changing lives, about creating something that would last. A chance to build, not just repair. Madison noticed the hesitation in his eyes, the way his brow furrowed as he considered the proposal. She didn't rush him. She knew that this kind of decision couldn't be made in a moment. It had to be something Jace came to on his own. "You don't have to decide right away," she said gently, her voice offering him a sense of calm. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I want you to understand something. You have a gift, Jace, and I'm not just talking about your mechanical skills. I'm talking about your ability to see potential where others don't. That's rare. And that's exactly what this project needs." Jace sat back in the chair, his mind spinning. He had never thought of himself as anything special. Sure, he was good with cars, good at fixing things, but he had always believed that was the extent of his abilities. He was just a mechanic, nothing more. But as he sat there, with Madison's words echoing in his head, he began to realize that maybe he had underestimated himself. Maybe he was capable of more than just fixing broken things. "I don't know," he said quietly, his voice tinged with doubt. "This isn't just about fixing a car or putting together a machine. This is a whole new world for me. I've never done anything like this before." Madison leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "And that's exactly why I need you. You see things differently, Jace. You don't just follow instructions or go through the motions. You bring something unique to the table. That's why this project will work. With you on board, we can take it to heights that no one else has even considered." Jace felt a surge of something deep within him, something that he hadn't felt in years, a spark of possibility. He had spent so much of his life feeling stuck, unsure of how to break free from the cycle of work, day after day, always fixing the same things, always stuck in the same routine. But now, here was an opportunity that could change all of that. He could take his skills and use them to build something new, to make a real impact, to step out of the shadows and into a future he had never dared to dream of. But doubt lingered. The life he had known was simple. It was predictable. He knew how to fix an engine, how to diagnose a problem, and solve it. But this project, this opportunity, was different. It was unknown. And the unknown was always terrifying. "What if I fail?" Jace asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "What if I'm not enough?" Madison's gaze softened, her eyes full of understanding. "Everyone feels that way at first. It's normal to be afraid of the unknown. But here's the thing. Failure isn't the end. It's just a part of the journey. And you won't be alone in this. I'm here, every step of the way. We'll build this together." Her words were a balm to his frayed nerves, and for the first time in a long time, Jace felt a sense of calm wash over him. He realized that Madison wasn't asking him to do this alone. She wasn't asking him to take on the world by himself. She was offering him a chance to join her, to be part of something bigger than himself. He looked back at the proposal in front of him, the documents that had seemed so overwhelming just moments ago, now looking like a challenge he might just be ready to take on. Maybe he wasn't just a mechanic after all. Maybe, just maybe, he was capable of more than he had ever given himself credit for. "I'll do it," he said finally, his voice steady now. "I'll join you. But I need to know something." Madison raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "What do you need to know?" Jace took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling on him. "What's next? Where do we go from here?" Madison's smile returned, brighter this time. "We get to work. Together. This is just the beginning, Jace. The real journey starts now." And just like that, something inside him clicked. The uncertainty that had held him back for so long began to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose that he had never known before. He wasn't just fixing things anymore. He was building something. Something that could change lives, including his own. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, Jace didn't feel afraid of it. He felt ready. The following days were a blur for Jace, filled with meetings, phone calls, and endless discussions about the project that had somehow become his new reality. Madison had kept her promise. She had guided him through every step, introducing him to people, explaining the intricacies of the business, and showing him the vision she had for the future. It wasn't just about fixing things. It was about creating something sustainable, something that would change the industry, that would leave a legacy. At first, Jace felt out of place in the boardroom meetings. He was used to greasy engines and rusted-out cars, not financial statements and strategies. But Madison had a way of making him feel like he belonged, like his hands-on experience was as valuable as the numbers on a spreadsheet. Every time he voiced his thoughts, every time he spoke up about what he had learned from years of working with machines, Madison listened. She respected him. She trusted him. And slowly, he began to trust himself. Jace started to see the world differently. He began to realize that what he had been doing for years, working with his hands, fixing cars, solving problems, wasn't just a skill. It was a mindset. It was about persistence, about not giving up, no matter how difficult the task. It was about seeing potential in things that others discarded. And that mindset, he now saw, could be applied to much more than just cars. As the weeks went by, Jace's role in the project grew. He found himself overseeing parts of the operation, managing teams of people who were just as passionate about the mission as he was. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a leader, a key player in a vision that was becoming a reality. There were still challenges, there always would be, but Jace had learned to embrace them. He had learned that challenges were opportunities in disguise, tests to see how far he could go. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling meeting with investors, Jace found himself alone in the company's workshop, staring at a car that was partially disassembled. The engine was half removed, the parts scattered across the workbench in front of him. It was a mess, but that was the point. He knew it would come together. He always knew it would. As he worked, his mind wandered back to that day when Madison had pulled over on the side of the road, her Rolls-Royce broken down, and how he had thought it was just another routine fix. He never could have imagined that it would lead him here, to this new life, to this new purpose. He thought back to the doubt he had felt in those first few hours, how he had questioned his own worth, his ability to contribute to something so much bigger than himself. But now, looking back, he saw how far he had come. He had stepped into a world that was unfamiliar, that had seemed too big, too intimidating. But he had learned to grow with it, to rise to the occasion, and to find strength in the unknown. Madison's voice broke his reverie, pulling him out of his thoughts. She had entered the workshop silently, as she always did, her presence commanding without ever being intrusive. "Need a hand?" she asked, her eyes taking in the scene. Jace looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Just trying to get this thing back together," he said with a small smile. "I guess you could say I'm doing what I know best." Madison returned his smile, but there was a depth to her expression, something that made Jace pause. "You've done more than just fix things, Jace. You've built something here. You've helped build something important." Jace shrugged, his humility still intact despite the changes he had gone through. "I've just been doing what I've always done. I guess it's just a bigger scale now." Madison shook her head, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "It's more than that. You've grown. And you've helped others grow too. This project, this vision, it wouldn't be where it is without you." Jace didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't used to compliments, especially not ones that went beyond his technical skills. He had always been the guy who fixed things in the background, never the one who took center stage. But here, now, with Madison standing in front of him, He realized that maybe that had been part of the problem all along. He had always underestimated his own potential. But now he was beginning to see it, piece by piece. Madison stepped closer, her gaze softening. You know, you could do anything now. Anything you want. This project, this company, could be the start of something even bigger. There's a lot of potential here, a lot of untapped possibilities. But it's up to you. You can choose what you want to make of it. Jace's heart pounded at her words. The weight of the decision before him felt heavy, but not in a way that frightened him. It felt like an opportunity, a chance to really make a difference. For so long, he had thought that his place in the world was limited to the grease-streaked corners of his mechanic's shop. But now, he was beginning to realize that the world was much bigger than he had ever allowed himself to see. Maybe it's time to take the leap, Jace said slowly, his voice filled with a quiet confidence that had grown within him over the past few months. Maybe it's time to build something new. Madison's eyes sparkled, a flicker of pride in them. I thought you might say that. For the first time, Jace felt a surge of excitement and fear in equal measure. He had spent his whole life fixing things, solving problems one by one. But this was different. This was about creating something that would last, something that could change not just his life, but the lives of others as well. The path ahead wasn't clear, and it wasn't easy. There would be challenges, failures, and moments of doubt. But Jace knew one thing for certain now. He was ready to step into the unknown and embrace the journey, no matter where it led. As he stood there, surrounded by the familiar hum of the workshop and the quiet rhythm of his own thoughts, he realized that this moment, this decision, was the beginning of something much greater than he had ever imagined. And for the first time in a long time, Jace Carter felt truly alive.